Certainly, Congressman, you raised an important issue and one of great priority to both me and the entire Department of Justice. We are committed to prosecuting cyber criminals who do seek to steal our intellectual property. I believe the last recent estimate was that we are losing possibly up to $250 billion worth of intellectual property a year through hacks and crimes and the likes. And we look forward to working with you on the proposed legislation that you mentioned, that you discussed.
So you do believe a civil private right of action would complement your efforts, given the resources and limited actions many times that you have? That would be something that would complement your actions that you currently have?
I'd like to see the language, but certainly we look forward to working with you on that.
Okay. Also, I want to, and we're jumping to several different issues, and one I want to come back to that was brought up earlier, and it has to do with sanctuary cities. And it goes back to a question that I want to know, has DOJ taken any action to withhold law enforcement grants or other funding to sanctuary jurisdictions? If not, why not?
Well, the grant process under which DOJ operates is a formula-based grant-making process, and different organizations and entities within cities apply. Certainly with respect to our grant-making process in general, we're always cognizant of concerns that come up within certain jurisdictions. We have found that through our grant-making process, we can effectuate great change in a host of very significant and focused
But Madam Attorney
areas.
General, if I don't mind interrupting here, but shouldn't following the law be a prerequisite for a grant?
Certainly we work to enforce not only the laws that you are referring to, but all the laws with the cities with whom we work.
But getting a grant, if you're not following the law, have no intention of following the law, why should, I mean, at that point in time, the application should be just set aside, follow the law, we'll talk to you about your grant. Why can't we get to that?
Well, thank you for the question, Congressman. Certainly it's been raised in a number of contexts. We do find that our grants are very focused on specific areas. For example, providing more police officers on the ground.
Again, you got great talking points. I appreciate that. That's not my question. How can you get, if you're using money to circumvent the law, as you just basically implied, that's even worse. You don't incentivize this kind of behavior. Why would it just not be a permanent stop to the grant-making process until a city or a municipality or a government entity complied with the law?
Well, Congressman, with respect to our grant-making process, we do make very discrete, focused grants to specific portions of city government.
So in essence, you will subsidize lawless behavior. That's what the Attorney General of the United States of America has just testified to. And you can sit and, I mean, that's what you just testified to. You'll give money to a locality that is not following the law because you want to use your grant in discrete private ways. Is that what you just said? We
use our grants to incentivize better behavior in a host of ways, and our grant-making policy is focused on a very rigorous application process. So you're telling the people of the 9th District of Georgia that taxpayer dollars that come to them is being used and will not even be considered if a locality is not complying with the law, you will still give their tax dollars to a locality that's not complying with the law. Is that your testimony? We look at a host of factors. So the answer is yes. Not your host of factors. It is yes. I mean, this is the part that, and the ranking member made a great point earlier when he first started. And I'm going to finish up with this. I've had these hearings, and you'll be back before us at another time, and I look forward to those hearings. But what is amazing to me and the American people watching here is, he said, tell the truth and work those, but also being prepared for questions. You're going to get VA questions here. You're going to get sanctuary city questions here. You're going to get a lot of host of questions, and even the ranking member listed those off. Coming and giving an answer that we're looking for, that we're not being, basically a setup where the people don't understand that, is the thing that very much frustrates most people with Washington, D.C. You've been very well prepared for this by those who want to prepare you for these hearings. There's just a big disconnect at a certain point in time when the Attorney General of the United States will not say that they will not want to give money to an organization or to a locality that is not following the law. We're still going to give taxpayer money to that. That is unacceptable and what most people find abhorrent. And with that, I recognize the gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Delby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Attorney General, for being here with us today and for all of your time. As you are no doubt aware, in 2012, voters in my home state of Washington passed Initiative 502, which legalized the sale, consumption, and taxation of marijuana products. Including Washington, 23 states and the District of Columbia have legalized some form of marijuana And in 2016, several more states are expected to consider marijuana legislation, ballot initiatives. Washington's already collected over $80 million in tax revenue from sales. And since the passage of Initiative 502, court filings in Washington for low-level marijuana offenses have dropped by 98%, saving the state millions of dollars in enforcement and in judicial expenses. As you also may know, there are a wide variety of marijuana reform measures that have been introduced in Congress, and there's still the ongoing concerns about the conflict between state and federal law in many areas, particularly in banking, for example. And they range from legalization to rescheduling, and a bill that I recently introduced, the Smart Enforcement Act. My bill would give you, the Attorney General, the authority to waive the Controlled Substances Act for states that are effectively regulating marijuana themselves, such as Washington State. So it authorizes a waiver from the Controlled Substances Act for states that meet requirements preventing the distribution of marijuana to minors, violence or use of firearms, and cultivation and distribution of marijuana, and drug driving. And I want to thank your team for answering many questions that my office had as we were in the drafting process. I wanted to hear from you your thoughts on this type of legislation and this approach to reform, and about how the enforcement priorities that were outlined in the Cole memo have been working.
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. And we're happy to provide information and assistance as needed by your staff as you review this important issue. Certainly, the factors that have been outlined in the Cole memo and that have been stressed in further discussions with the U.S. Attorney community remain consistent. Our concerns are the areas that you mentioned. Where a state chooses to have a legalized marijuana structure, we will review that structure and look at that, but our concern is, frankly, that marijuana getting into the hands of minors and also being trafficked out of state where a state may have not made the same choice. We also have grave concerns about the areas of the edible products that are so appealing to children and expose them to this product, which I don't believe is the goal of the regime that you're talking about, but is a concern of ours. We're also concerned as well about the violence that is still associated with the higher levels of the marijuana trafficking industry. And so at the federal level, we are focusing our resources on that type of enforcement action. And we continue to do so. In my former office, we prosecuted cases involving importation of large amounts of marijuana, utilizing an Indian reservation on the Canadian border, and also utilizing organized crime connections. So we certainly still have a robust practice. Again, we focus limited federal resources on those types of cases.
But we know that we have states like ours that have challenges, banking in particular, because they're still, even while there may not be active activity against states who have legalized, we still have situations where banks are not able to serve these types of businesses because of the conflict between state and federal law. My legislation would allow you to issue waivers to states that meet and provide an effective regulatory regime. And these would be 3-year waivers so that you're able to give those states a waiver from the Controlled Substances Act and establish the requirements they were going to meet. Is that a type of legislation that you think would help address the issues that we have between federal law and state law today?
Well, we're certainly happy to review any proposal that you think would be helpful and to provide comment on that. I'd have to look further at that proposal before I could respond.
Well, it's a bill we've introduced, and we work to get feedback from your office too, so I'd welcome any feedback there. I also just wanted to ask quickly, you talked about creating a new cybersecurity unit within the criminal division, and I wanted to ask exactly what made you decide to do that, and what are the goals of that particular new unit?
That is within our computer crime unit. We have a cybersecurity unit focusing on computer intrusions, computer hacking, and the sophisticated types of computer activity that hackers, many of whom are based overseas, are using to infiltrate our computer systems. The types of activity that we're looking at involve not just the wholesale theft of private information, which can be so challenging at a very basic level of identity theft, but also the theft of personal information such as healthcare information, which raises significant privacy concerns, and also intellectual property. We find that private industry is being targeted, particularly our financial services are being targeted at an increasing level by cyber intruders who are seeking to essentially take advantage of American technology and ingenuity and siphon it overseas for production there without the benefit of the work that we put into it. As I indicated in response to Mr. Chairman's question, that recent estimates indicate that approximately up to $250 billion worth a year worth of our intellectual property is being lost to us through that. This is a grave concern as all of us seek to make sure that our economy is as strong as possible, that we get the benefit of American ingenuity and American technology, and that we protect what are protected secrets. Many of the matters that are being stolen are not only sensitive, but very, very unique to particular industries and important to the growth of particular discrete industries. We felt that we needed to increase the resources to this because the problem is increasing. In addition, however, it is working very, very well. And one way in which it's working very well is through our connections to private industry. We, along with the FBI and the Secret Service, have made extensive contacts and discussions with private industry, general counsel, CEOs, CIOs, about cybersecurity and the need to share information about breaches when they occur. We are also ramping up within the federal government our own efforts to provide information to companies when we determine that they've been the subject of a breach or a hack. We are working to reduce our response time to get information to them as quickly as possible so they can also begin protecting their data and protecting their information. So it's been a very positive effort.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Go back.
Go back. Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Madam Attorney General. When you were the U.S. Attorney and you receive inquiries about an ongoing investigation, how would you respond to those inquiries typically?
Well, Mr. Congressman, thank you for the question. It is department policy and certainly my own view as a career prosecutor, but typically our response would be that we're not able to comment on an ongoing matter.
And part of the reason for that is because if you're out making statements in the press, that detracts from the public's confidence that you're doing it by the facts, if you're trying to prejudice the investigation. Is that fair to say?
That is certainly one of the reasons, Congressman.
Let me ask you this. When you were an AUSA, a line prosecutor, did you ever prosecute a case against someone with whom you had either a relationship on a personal or professional basis?
Can you be more specific?
Did you ever get assigned a case where the defendant was somebody that you knew either personally or professionally that had a private relationship?
That did not occur in my experience.
Would it have been appropriate, do you think, for you to have had a case if someone who, you know, maybe you work with prior to taking a position as a prosecutor, or would that case likely have been sent to a prosecutor who did not have that relationship?
It depends entirely on the facts and circumstances of the case, what type of case it was, whether it involved an individual, an entity. Every case is looked at on its own merits.
And so here's why I'm kind of asking these questions, because I delivered a letter, you probably haven't had a chance to read it yet, from a number of my colleagues, over 40 of us, requesting that you appoint a special counsel to look into the situation with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's emails. And the applicable regulations say that that's warranted if there's a conflict of interest for the GOJ or there are other extraordinary circumstances, and it would be in the public interest to appoint an outside special counsel. So here's why I think it makes sense. You were appointed to the U.S. Attorney in 1999 by President Bill Clinton. And I've had a chance to meet a lot of people who've served as ambassadors, different. I've never met anybody who doesn't have esteem for the person that appointed them to high office. I mean, it's a tremendous honor. Your current boss, who appointed you to your current job, President Obama, appointed you again to the U.S. Attorney's Office and now to your current job as the Attorney General. And it's been made statements saying that somehow there's no damage to national security. And then you have the presumptive presidential nominee of your party is subject to this investigation. So to me, that would meet any definition of extraordinary circumstances. I don't think we could probably find a similar fact pattern in American history where such an investigation was put up. So why not, so that the public has confidence that this is done in an apolitical manner, assign somebody who's trustworthy to serve as a special counsel, and then this way, however the investigation goes out, the public's going to have much more confidence in the outcome.
Well, Congressman, thank you for your letter. I look forward to reviewing it, and we'll provide a response.
But why not just forget about the letter? Why aren't these extraordinary circumstances?
Well, Congressman, I would never forget about your letter, first of all, and we will provide a response to that. Certainly, we'll review the issues that you raised, and we'll provide you with a response.
Do you think, though, that you as the Attorney General, then having an investigation that concerns the spouse of somebody that's appointed you previously to a very important position? I mean, and it's not saying that somehow you're not going to try to do a good job, but it's just, it's human nature, I think, and then the appearance of whether there's a conflict of interest at stake is something that I think a lot of people are concerned about. And I appreciate you're going to review the letter, but do you not see why that would cause people a little bit of pause?
Congressman, we will review everything raised in your letter and provide you with a response.
Okay. Well, we look forward to doing that, and hopefully you will do that in a timely fashion. Your predecessor usually did not respond in a timely fashion. The vetting of the refugees. The testimony you gave is different from the testimony that we had from the FBI director a couple weeks ago about our capacity to vet. And he, I think, said that you're getting better at it, but that you can't guarantee. I think you are confident that they'll be able to vet. Well, let me ask you this. Your department brought terrorism charges against a number of Bosnian immigrants, some of whom, at least one of whom, was a refugee. So if our vetting is good, what happened in that case involving the Bosnian who was indicted on material support for terrorism charges in February 2015?
Well, I'd have to look at that specific case before I could provide you with an answer about that, Congressman. And, of course, if it were an ongoing case, I wouldn't be able to comment about it. So, again, I'm not able to give you that answer at this time. And we'll see what information we can provide about that matter. As I indicated, we have a robust screening mechanism for refugees from all countries. It relies upon efforts of not just the FBI, but the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, State Department. It uses interviews. It uses biometric data. It is, as I indicated earlier, a challenging process, as is everything we do in law enforcement. But that does not mean that we're not committed to doing everything that we can to make sure that the process is as robust as possible and that we do everything that we can to protect the American people.
I think the concern, though, is that you can do everything right, but given the lack of data, the lack of information about we have on people who are being pulled out of a very, very difficult circumstance, essentially an Islamic civil war, that you can do everything right and you could still have people come into the country who mean to do us harm. This Bosnian was able to get in probably circumstances that it would have been easier to vet than with Syrians, and so I know a lot of us have concerns, but I appreciate your testimony and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Jefferson.
Thank the chairman, and I thank the Attorney General for your presence and your testimony here today and your leadership. One of my colleagues from Illinois mentioned earlier that in the city of Chicago, approximately 60% of the instances of gun violence can be traced to weapons that were initially purchased in either the neighboring states of Wisconsin or Indiana, as well as, I believe, from Mississippi. It's also the case that many of the weapons that are used to commit crime in South Central Los Angeles can be traced initially to the neighboring state of Arizona. We've got a similar problem in New York in terms of the weapons that are used often to commit crime in the city. And in fact, this has been illustrated recently. We've experienced the deaths of 4 officers in the line of duty over the last 10 months. Detective Ramos, Detective Liu, Brian Moore, and Randolph Holder. It was a very diverse group, sort of emblematic of the increased diversity of the New York City Police Department. One was African American, one was white, one was Asian, one was Latino. They all paid the ultimate price. One of the things that they had in common was that the weapons that were used to kill each of these officers came from outside of the state. Detective Ramos, Detective Liu were killed by a weapon that came from Georgia. Officer Moore, a weapon that came from Georgia. Officer Holder, a weapon that came from South Carolina. And so it seems that even as certain states see fit to tighten their gun violence prevention laws, because there's no national legislative effort, many states have been subjected to closing the front door, but guns being able to come into those states through the back door. And so my question is, do you think that the gun trafficking laws that currently exist on the books are adequate for the ATF, the FBI, the Department of Justice to do its job in combating gun violence?
Well, certainly, Congressman, the protection of the American people, particularly when it comes to gun violence, is one of our highest priorities, and we are committed to making every effort to carry out that goal and that responsibility. We look to vigorously enforce all the laws on the books. There are a number of cases. I recall when I was still in Brooklyn that my colleague in the Brooklyn DA's office was able to essentially close down a firearm trafficking ring that was bringing guns, as you indicated, from Georgia to New York. So it's something that all levels of law enforcement take very seriously. We work closely with our state and local colleagues.